So welcome back. We've been talking about fear and how fear can control us, and fear is the border of the reality that we know. And fear is just a companion on this journey. It actually is the energy of the border of the reality that we know. And if we let the ideas of fear or anxiety or doubt be our guides, we will always find ourselves contracting and reacting to circumstances. So we're learning now how to master our own mind. The greatest power you have is given to you because you are a son or a daughter of this infinite presence, Spirit itself, which moves through mind to create. And you've been given an access point to the infinite mind through your own conscious awareness. What you put your attention on, the universe hears as your intention. So now we're working with how to manage the energy of our fears so that it actually becomes a stepping stone instead of a stumbling block. Everybody who experiences greatness, everybody who lives a life that they report is alive-making and fulfilling and value-driven and creative and all of the wonderful things that every single one of us really are here to be and do. It isn't in the absence of fear. It's in the presence of that kind of fear, but how they manage it. So that's what we're learning, some strategies and skills in deepening and developing our own spiritual muscles in how we overcome our fear. You know, in listening to me, I'm sure you can tell that I am a student of many different philosophies, world religions, the sciences, and the psychologies. And I'm particularly a student of the life and teaching of Jesus of Nazareth as a template for transformation. And I've been to Israel over a dozen times and taken groups there, and it's very clear to me that in the stories of this person's life are codes for each one of us to understand the dynamic power you and I have to also do, in quotes, the things he did and greater things still. And we do that not in some extraordinary life. We do that in our ordinary life. We start right where we are, unpacking the meaning of some of these stories, and then applying these same stories to our own lives. Part of the story I want to share today in terms of overcoming our fear. We took some time last time and we explored the idea of Delilah from the Old Testament and how Delilah are really fear thoughts that kind of worm their way in, knock on the door of our awareness, and dress up in very seductive clothing. And it's very tempting to spend time with our fear thoughts. We can take them to dinner, we can take them to bed, as Samson did, and we lose the connection to our spiritual strength. In the New Testament, there's a story about Jesus and the disciples, and they've gone out on the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you haven't been to Israel, it's easy to imagine the Sea of Galilee as some great big huge ocean-like body of water. It's not. It's a large lake is what the Sea of Galilee is, but it's a very deep lake. And so when the wind would come, there would be way big waves that would surface, and the boats, these were little boats, they would rock and turn and sometimes turn over. So the disciples are very frightened, and the winds and the waves were boisterous. They look out and they see this apparition approaching the boat. They look at it and they're frightened even more because it looks like a ghost, and then they realize that it's Jesus, and he is actually walking on water. And they're not only amazed, they're shocked. And he says, "Don't be afraid, it's me, it is I." And then he says, "Come out with me on the water." Well, the 12 of them look at each other and it's like, is he nuts? We're not going to go out there on that water. And in this essence, sometimes when the higher self in us says, come on, you can do this. You can really create the life you want. Step out of the boat of your contained life. Step out on faith. Step out. And 12 parts of us are saying, whoa, wait a minute. I don't have the money. I don't have this. I don't have that. But in this story, Peter says, okay, I'm going to do it. Now, Peter represents our faith. It's a believing that's bigger than the things we can see or measure with our five senses. It's a believing in a higher power. It's a relationship with how it works in the universe. It's a relationship with the laws of the universe that always work and work perfectly, but it comes from understanding. It's not a blind belief. It comes from understanding, and that's what you're developing by listening to these lessons and applying them in your life. So Peter says, okay. And he keeps his eyes on Jesus, and he steps out on that boisterous water, and he walks. He takes a few steps, and then a wave washes up across his ankles and up his calves, and he looks at the water, and he gets very frightened as he looks at the water, and he sinks. So he's had the experience of walking on water. Now he's had the experience of, again, looking at conditions and getting frightened. And you know that when you're frightened, you lower your vibration. In that lower vibration, he sinks into, quote unquote, the problem, which in his world at that moment was the boisterous waves. He sinks into the problem. But Peter is smart enough to remember that there's a higher power. And the metaphor in this story is that he reaches up and he says, in essence, Lord, save me. Or in other words, law, work. I apply the law of life in my life right now. And he reaches up, meaning he reaches up to a higher state of consciousness. He reaches up to a higher thought. He reaches up to a higher domain of knowing. And again, in this metaphor, he is lifted up. Now, there are those who would say Peter was a failure. I mean, he got out and he sank. Well, in my mind, and in studying the story of these, I think there were 11 others who never even got out of the boat. And if you look around your world and in your life, you'll find that that's pretty much true. 12 are offered the opportunity. Every single one of us have been given creative capacities of mind, imagination, and intuition, and reason, and memory, and will, and perception. And most of us use those capacities to shape lives that Gibran in The Prophet would call pygmy lives, that we just live in the very smallest dimensions of ourselves, when all the while the capacity and the call for greatness is in every one of us. But we have to also get out of our boat. So Peter gets out. He has the experience of the glory of walking on water. He also has the experience in his failure of the grace of being lifted up again. And so there's nothing wrong with failure. It's the opportunity to have feedback about our learning cycle. Don't be afraid of having a mistake or having failure. Be more afraid of staying stuck in your boat. So this is just such a very, very important story for us because it's clear that Jesus is saying to everyone in the boat, whatever your boat looks like, get out of your boat. Keep your attention on your dream. Keep your attention on the fact that you're part of something that's way bigger than any circumstance or situation that might stop you. That power, that presence is everywhere, and it's indwelling you. And as long as you keep your attention on the truth sets you free. It sets you free from the containments. It sets you free from the fears. But the minute you turn like Peter and we look at the water, we go, oh my gosh, the economy's doing this, or oh my gosh, the housing market's doing that, or oh my gosh, there's downsizing. Those are the facts. You don't discard the facts. You don't deny the facts, but you deny the power of those facts to control your life. Years ago, I met a man named Bernie Siegel, who was one of the early researchers in what he called exceptional cancer patients, as an oncologist and a physician like Maslow, who said, I don't want to study what's wrong with people, I want to study what's right with people. He decided that he would look at cancer survivors who had very low rates statistically of surviving. So if a disease occurred and 80% of the people who got that disease died, Siegel said, well, I want to study the 20% who don't. And if 90% died, I want to study the 10% who don't. And I want to find out what the consistencies are in that group of what he would then call exceptional cancer patients. His first book was called Love, Medicine, and Miracles. And I remember when I brought him to speak to an event I was creating, and we sat and had lunch together and talked, I was so moved by his recognition that the people who transformed difficult situations were people who did not deny the facts, but they denied the power of the prognosis of those facts to affect them. When they heard the statistic that 80% of people die, they simply said that I want to discover what it means to be in that 20%. There was something that many of them had, though few of them knew that it was really the power that helped carry them through. Those people were not fighting a disease. It isn't that they didn't do treatments, that they didn't do things to overcome the disease, but where their energy was, where their attention was, and where their focus was on what they wanted to do after the disease. And they didn't wait until the disease was done to be doing those things. If they wanted to write the book, they were spending part of their time now writing the book. Whatever it was, they wanted to start their business, whatever energy they had that could be put into the life they wanted to live post-disease, they were already living it. So their cells were getting messages of life, not fight. Their cells were getting messages of hope, not fear. And our cells carry our immune system. And so the immune system was building even in the presence of difficulty. Well, you have an immune system actually in your own mind. And the virus of fear can become rampant throughout the mind. And we can't even see opportunities that are right here for us where someone else could see them because they're not consumed by fear. So Peter, our faith, he steps out of the boat. He has an experience of standing strong and he has an experience of falling. But when he falls, he then reconnects. If I have a lamp in my hand and I'm walking over to the electric plug to plug in that lamp, I am fully expecting the light to come on. And if the light doesn't come on when I plug in the lamp and turn on the switch, I don't get down on my knees and beg the law of electricity, please, dear law of electricity, help me. I know that somehow I'm out of connection with the flow or the current that always does what it does if I'm in harmony with it. And the mind and life are not any different. It operates by immutable laws that are for us to study, understand, and then implement. So what we're discovering here is that thoughts of fear actually shift the vibration that we're in, removing our ability to see opportunities, apprehend understandings that actually facilitate the steps that are ours to take today in the direction of our dream. Jack Canfield tells a story about how you and I could drive clear across country with our headlights on, and we're only seeing 200 feet in front of us. But if we know the destination where we're headed, and we keep ourselves headed in that direction, even though we cannot see the whole way, if we just keep heading in that direction and keep moving in that direction, we will find our way. It's not different than in the Old Testament when David, the psalmist, writes, in essence, he's saying it like this, "Oh, I get it. The Lord, or the law, is like a lamp unto my feet and a light upon my path." Israel's a hilly country. It's rocky, and it's hot a lot of the year. And so in ancient days, they would travel at night, and they would actually literally strap foot lamps onto their feet, oil lamps, so that they could see, so that they've got their camels, they've got their big baskets on their head, they've got their kids they're taking, and they're traveling, and this is how it was done. They didn't want to trip and fall over the unseen rocks, so they strapped foot lamps onto their feet. And with a foot lamp, you can see the next step. And then you take that next step. Now you can let fear say, I don't know the whole way, and what's beyond that step? There might be something bad that could be out there. But if you don't take the steps, the light can't show you the next step. It's only by taking the step that is apparent that you can take the next step. Well, you can't take a step that's apparent if your mind is so filled with fear you can't even see what's apparent. So this is learning then to turn our fear and turn it into faith. So how do we do that? Well, there's an old teaching story about a Native American who goes to his chief, and this is many, many years ago, and it is time for him to go out on his vision quest, and he's frightened. He's going to have to leave the village, he's going to have to leave the camp, he's going to have to go out, and there's bears and tigers and lions and all kinds of things out in the forest that he's frightened of. And so he goes to the chief and he says, I want to do the vision quest, but it's like there's two dogs inside of me fighting. One who says I can and one who says I can't, and they're fighting, and I'm frightened and I'm confused. And the chief just very gently puts his hand on the young brave's shoulder. He looks him in the eye, and he says, the one who says you can will win. And the boy opens his eyes wide, and he looks into his chief's knowing face, and he says, so how do you know that? And the chief said, because that is the one you will feed. Like two dogs fighting, one you feed and one you starve. So how do you do that? How do you feed your faith and starve your fear? Your attention. Your attention is the stream of life force that you direct, and wherever you direct it, it will magnify. Where thoughts flow, energy grows. Thoughts held in mind reproduce after their kind. You and I understand this with the law of the farm, that if we plant a seed, nurture it, attend it, give it time, it will bear the fruit of the seed that it is, always. Apple seeds bear apples. Pear seeds bear pears. Corn seeds bear corn. Fear seeds bear fear, not only fear thoughts, but fear results, containment, constriction. And that's not what this is about. But it doesn't mean you don't have to deal with it. It just means it's part of the evolutionary curve. And as you move forward in your life, at first you were afraid to take 2 steps. Now, I'm a grandmother. I have wonderful grandkids in my life. My children had, within 5 years, we had 5 grandchildren. And so I was watching these little wonderful beings learning how to walk. And it was very instructive to me in seeing how we as adults also learn to walk in new ways, how we learn to take the steps that we've been afraid to take in relationships or business or creative arts or whatever it is that we really feel drawn to be or do, make a difference in the environment or whatever it is. Taking new steps are not just difficult for a 12-month-old, but wherever we are. And so when I was watching my grandson Joel learn how to walk, he had an older sister, Allie, his mom and dad, Jenny and Jorge, and he's watching them, and they're walking on their hind legs. He wants to walk on his hind legs too, but he's crawling, so he's down on the ground. He doesn't have the freedom. He doesn't have the mobility. He doesn't have the ability to run. He's just barely able to move around. So pretty soon he learns to pull himself up, and they had a little round coffee table, and he could actually navigate all around that coffee table as long as he was holding on. It's like the frying pan. As long as I've got the frying pan, I'm feeling safe. But one day, I happened to be there, he was pulled by a longing. He had the discontent. We've been talking about longing and discontent. He had the discontent. He was stuck at that table. But he had a longing. And the longing across the room was a toy he wanted. And he looks around and he sees that other people are able to move freely. And so he takes a risk. And he lets go of that table. And he takes those 1, 2 little faltering little steps, and then he falls down. And he crawls back over, pulls himself back up, and again, 1, 2 steps and falls down over and over and over. He did this. And of course, as he did this, he began to master balance. He began to master how the muscles work to make one leg move in front of the other. And never once when he fell down did I ever see him sit down, kind of throw his hands up and go, "That's it. I guess I'm just not meant to be a walker." No. But you see, you and I think we're smarter than that. So we fall down in love, and we go, "That's it. I guess it's not God's will, or I'm just not meant to have love in my life." Or we fall down in business, or we fall down in some regard, and we then often allow ourselves to entertain fear thoughts, believe in constriction, build a frying pan with very large sides to it, and there we stay. So learning to feed our faith and starve our fear, learning that process, that's a mastery practice. It's not something you just do it once or do it twice. It's a way of being, a way of living. That as you feed your fear will grow. If you feed your faith or your understanding will grow. It's that simple. And remember, we feed whatever the energy is directed with through our attention. Your attention is how the universe knows what you want. Even if you put your attention on what you don't want, the universe doesn't know you don't want that any more than the earth knows that you don't want the seeds you planted in it. It's not going to say to you, "I'm not going to grow these seeds." It has no will not to grow the seeds you plant. Where you place your attention, you are placing your intention, and you are very powerful, way more than you know. You can say, "I want this life, I want this dream," but if my attention or my energy goes to all the things that could go wrong, or all the things I've never been able to do, or all the things that anybody ever said about me, the universe will always prosper where I'm placing my energy. And you are a tremendously prosperous being, and you're prosperous in where you have put your attention. How the universe knows what I want is where I direct the energy, where I put my attention. So if I really want my dream, then I'm going to turn from my fear and turn back to faith over and over again. Not without sinking sometimes, not without making mistakes. We don't have to be perfect either, and that's the best part about this. You just need a little more attention on your faith than your fear. And you're going to see a dynamic and a dramatic result as you begin to do this in your life. So feed your faith, starve your fear. You don't do it once, you don't do it twice, you do it daily. Imagine that someone came into your house and they are an unwanted visitor, as would be the fear thought that wants to come in and be entertained at the table of your own mind. So the fear thought knocks on the door of your awareness, comes in to sit down and be nourished by you, by your attention, because where we place our attention, we're placing our intention. And remember, thought is just energy. Where I place my attention, I'm placing my intention because I'm focusing my energy there. So if I have a guest that comes to the table to stay with me and I quit entertaining that guest, I quit feeding that guest, I quit putting out the towels, I quit doing everything that would cause the guest to feel welcome, eventually that guest is going to leave. And it's the same thing with our fear. While it may go stand outside the door of our mind, in essence, that thought doesn't have to control our choices. So the what if it won't happen? What if you fell out on your face? What if just say, you know what, if that happens, look it square in the face for just a moment and say, if that happens, I'll handle it. The universe and I'll handle it. My higher power and I'll handle it. God and I'll handle it. But that's not where I'm putting my energy, is on what could go wrong. I'm now turning my attention to what I can do today and what I can do now. And part of that is holding an energetic matrix of the blueprint of your dream firmly in your mind. Firmly in your mind. So it's not in the absence of fear that we're going to build our dreams. It's in the presence of some fear that we're going to build our dreams. But the fear isn't paramount, and the fear is not primary. If I'm fear-filled, I can't be faith-filled. It's not about being perfect. It's about a little shift, again and again and again, turning from fear and toward faith. If you live to be 80 years old, you will have lived 750,000 hours. So what if you were to invest just the next 24 hours, say, in learning how to develop and deepen your given capacity to choose which thought you're going to endow with the creative energy that is yours? What if we said, for the next 24 hours, I'm going to consciously pay attention to what I'm paying attention to. And I'm going to learn to direct that energy to life-giving thinking. When my mind wants to pick up old thoughts that are fearful or life-diminishing, I'm going to simply turn my attention back to a power thought, back to a thought that's in harmony with the dream I'm holding, with the life I want to live. And as soon as I notice that I'm sinking in that water of fear, I'm simply going to turn and reach for a higher thought, a new thought. I'm going to go back to feeding my faith by who I am, that I'm part of this incredible universe, that I have a mind, that I get to choose how I direct, that everything is energy, and that form is plastic to my thinking, and every other empowering thought you've heard, known, studied. You begin to build almost an arsenal of good, positive, power thoughts that you become almost like a foundation that you can stand on when you start to feel yourself sinking into the quicksand of fear thinking. There's a friend I have who, when he was a young man, he worked in a family business. And the family business over time went bankrupt. It was a very, very difficult time for him and his family. Eventually, he started his own business. Maybe 5 years later, he started his own business. It was in construction, which had been the training that he'd had working in his family business. And it grew to a point where he could actually very comfortably support his family. So now he had a number of people working for him. He'd always done fairly small building projects or construction projects. And then the opportunity came for a $5 million job. And Scott was just thinking, oh my gosh, this is such a big job to do, but I would love to get that bid. What if we got that job? And he started imagining what they could do with their business and how much more expansion they could have. And they just hired a new estimator. So the estimator went out and estimated the job and brought back the figures. They presented the bid to the potential client, and they got the job. Well, within 3 months after getting the job and doing the work, it was clear to Scott that the estimator, who was new at his job, had grossly underbid the project. In fact, by $750,000. And if they didn't get any profit at all, they were still going to be $750,000 in the red just for doing the job. The contracts were signed, they were already gathering materials, some of the excavation had been done, and Scott knew that if he proceeded as the plan was, even though the contracts were signed, he was going to lose his business if it played out that way. So when he talked to me about it, he said the first thing that he did, he just moved into such terror that here he was again recreating a bankruptcy situation. Later he would realize that that had been his big fear, that he would do what his father had done, which was create a situation that would cause bankruptcy. And he said that fear was just all-consuming. He said he went 3 nights without sleeping. And then he woke up and he said, wait a minute, I am recreating this by just infusing all my energy with fear. I haven't had one thought, really, that we could make it out of this. I haven't even entertained one thought that this could all work out. So he forced himself to take his mind off the problem and to begin to think about what it would be like if it had all worked out. What would it feel like if somehow, he didn't know how, but if in the end he was standing at the end of that job, looking at the job done, and knowing that his business had done well, it had been good for the people who had hired him, and that everybody had prospered in the process. Now, meanwhile, of course, his mind is saying, well, that isn't going to happen because you're 750 and chat, it's going on and on. But you have control. You may not know that, and you may not have exercised that, but the truth is you do have control as to pushing those thoughts to the edge of your awareness. Pushing them right to the edge of your awareness and not letting them dominate the stage of your thinking. Because the ideas that are coherent with the answers you need are not at the vibration of the fear. They're at a different frequency. Just as if you've got a channel control in your hand and you change the channel. It's a different picture, it's a different story, it's a different message. You have to change the frequency, and nobody can do that for you. But if you entertain all the thoughts of what can go wrong, everything that's coherent with what can go wrong is going to occur to you. But if you entertain the thoughts of, okay, I don't know how, but what would it feel like if it all worked out? How would I feel standing at the end of this job and everybody won, everybody prospered in this? So as he began to stand in that idea and think that, certain things began to occur to him. And he said to himself, okay, if I absolutely believed that this could work out, what would I think? What would I do? And if I absolutely believe it can't happen, then what would I think and what would I do? It was clear to him that one path took him where he didn't want to go, and even though he didn't see how to follow the other path or what exactly to do, that was the direction he wanted to move in. So once there was a little entrance of the possibility that this really could work out in his mind, once he had really fully entertained and felt this, there's got to be a way this can work out, then an idea came to him. If the tables were reversed, he said to himself, and I were the client, what would I want? Well, I'd want to know what's going on. So he made an appointment with his client. He said that he was absolutely sweating when he went in to talk to the client, to tell the truth, but he went in anyway and he presented the situation. And he said to the client, obviously the truth is I've signed a contract with you and you can force me to do this. But I can tell you now, I've been on the job long enough to tell you that we just flat, grossly underestimated it. And if we do this job and I give you the parts at our cost and we work at just cost, there's not only no profit in it for us, we're going to lose $750,000. And he showed the man all the figures. And then he said to the man, these are the actual figures. You can check them out. So he was met then from his client with just absolutely a stony silence for what seemed like a very, very long time. And then Scott said, then the owner of the company looked at him, sat back and said, you've been honest with us. And I believe you're going to honestly give us the product we want, and we just need to pay what it's worth. So we'll meet you halfway. I'm not going to pay for your profit. You underestimated it, and we went forward based on your estimate, but I want to be fair with you. And Scott said, we didn't make a dime of profit, but we all got paid for our labor, and we got paid for the supplies. But we didn't lose a dime either. And he said, I came out a huge winner because I learned a lot. I recognized that if I let that fear control me, I would never have had an idea about what to do. I've used that practice again and again and again. And Scott today is not only a very, very wealthy man economically, but he's a man who lives at peace in his own skin because he knows what he's made of and he knows what he's made for. Your fear, if you entertain it, will always leave you feeling frightened, insecure, and afraid. You'll look at others and feel jealous and envious. You always feel as if you're living in some kind of containment. Your vision lost, no signs of life. That's not what you're here for, and that's not what you came here to be. You're a spiritual being in a human adventure. In a human adventure, it's learning how to befriend that fear and say, yeah, I know who you are. You're what I've known about myself, that's all. You're the border of the reality I know, and every time I get close to that border and take a step over it, you're going to be there. Okay. And then we turn our attention back to what fuels the dream. What is the believing in ourselves and the believing in how it works in this universe? Just as when you plug in a lamp into electricity, if it isn't working, you don't think that the will of God is that you don't have light. You know that you just simply aren't connected properly. Earlier in this lesson, I mentioned my grandson, Joel. His mom, Jennifer, is my daughter. When Jenny was about 5, we would go to the public pool regularly because her older brothers really loved to swim. Jenny had some fear of the water that just seemed to have come in with her. And so all the time, 2, 3, 4, she's just hanging onto the edge of the pool. And we would try to encourage her and help her out, but she just wanted to hang on to the edge of the pool. Finally, at 5, all her friends have learned to swim. They're playing around. They're having fun. They're enjoying the water. And Jenny's starting to feel real discontented with her own life, that she's constricted, hanging on to the edge. And so there was one particular day where we were encouraging her to let go of the edge. It was okay to be afraid. Just don't let it stand in your way. You can let go of the edge of the pool. We'll be right here. And so there was a moment where we didn't make her. I knew enough to know that it was something that had to come from inside her. And so there was a moment when she made the decision herself to be willing to experience the fear for the vision, for the purpose of having the freedom that was on the other side of that fear. And she said, okay, I'm willing to do it, And she let go, and I took her hands, and then I took her out to the middle. I knew that if she had her tippy toes, she could actually touch the bottom of the pool right there. But she didn't know that. It was going to come clear up just over her chin. And she'd been so afraid of having water anywhere near her face that prior to this, it would have absolutely terrified her. In that moment, she made a decision. She was willing to have some fear, maybe even willing to be terrified, but she was going to do it anyway. And she had enough evidence that she believed that this was something she really wanted to do. So she goes out, I let go, and I could just see the moment when her tippy toes touched the bottom of the pool. Her eyes lit up, and she let that water come up around her chin and her face, and she started bouncing up and down. If you remember learning to swim, doing this and that feeling. And then she just paddles right back over and runs right over to the stairs, and she climbs out, and I'm thinking, why are you getting out? You just found this. She comes to the edge of the pool, she bends down, she just in a hunched position down, she looks at me, and she, with fists in her hands, she goes, "I've got the power." And it was such a great moment to see that 5-year-old touch a part of herself that was greater than the fear that had held her back for a long time in her little life. I watched that girl grow up over and over again, confronting things, and every once in a while she'd say, "I've got the power." It didn't mean she felt it. She felt frightened at times, but she went ahead anyway. When she was 18 years old, she decided she wanted to study dance in places that most people didn't even know were some of the great dancing academies in the world, and she would travel the world and go on her own, and I watched her again and again go to New York and live there and find her way and become part of dancing troupes around the world, and just an amazing life that unfolded because at one moment in time she made a decision that what she wanted was on the other side of the fear that was holding her back. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do, is make a decision for your dream. Yes, you'll have some fear, but you are more than that.